Hi all, welcome to this week 6 video. We're going to be talking about rhetorical terms and expanding your vocabulary and your understanding of the devices and appeals. Like I said, we're going to talk about the rhetorical square, which is ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos. We're going to talk about audience. We're going to do a little bit of practice with kairos. We're going to look at the appeals in connection to rhetorical devices, and we're going to revisit textual and contextual, as well as the expectations for the rhetorical analysis. All right, your writing warm-up. What audiences are you a part of? i.e., what outlets, resources, or conversations do you participate in daily? What communities are you a part of that inform the way you see the world? What values are most important to you? From your knowledge, how do you see ethos, pathos, logos, or kairos being effective or ineffective in your conversations or communities? Remember, you don't have to turn these in. These are just for you to warm up. Okay, the rhetorical square. You may or may not be familiar with that term. You may be more familiar with the term rhetorical triangle, ethos, pathos, logos, but there is actually a fourth one, and that's kairos. So ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos are all connected to audience. They appeal to the audience's sense of blank. The rhetors evaluate audience to determine which rhetorical appeals to use. And this, again, is going to help establish effectiveness, or will generate ineffectiveness, or partial effectiveness, or somewhat effectiveness. So ethos, then, would appeal to an audience's sense of credibility and character. Pathos is going to appeal to the emotions. So the use of pathos is going to be very emotional, very evocative. Logos appeals to an audience's sense of reason and logic. And kairos is going to appeal to an audience's sense of space-time concerns. It's going to be timely, it's going to be responsive. Like I said, you're probably a little more familiar with ethos, pathos, logos. They're the ones that are kind of covered more in depth either in high school or in other classes. But just to give you a brief refresher and how we want you to think about them specifically in this class, remember, ethos, ethics, its credibility and character. In this class, it is very important that you are specific when you're talking about ethos. There is situated ethos and there's invented ethos. You won't just say that the author is using ethos. You will say they are using situated ethos or invented ethos, or both. Situated ethos, as we talked about a little bit last week, is pre-existing credibility before we encounter a text. You can ask yourself, what does the audience already know about the rhetor? How does this impact the effectiveness of the message? Invented ethos, then, is credibility that is created within the text. How does the rhetor build character in the text? How do they connect with the audience to create trust? Pathos, suffering. It's emotional, it's evocative. What types of emotions do you identify in the text? What does the rhetor want the audience to feel as they engage with the text? How does the emotion impact the message? Is it more or less effective? Remember to be specific. Identify the emotion being appealed to the pathos. A rhetor never just uses pathos. Just like with ethos, where you have to specify if you're doing situated or invented ethos here. Whenever you're talking about pathos, you want to identify what emotion is being appealed to. The rhetor is using humor. The rhetor is appealing to the feeling of sympathy. We have empathy, anger, any kind of emotion that comes to the forefront of your mind, what you see happening here. Something that is often used for pathos, you know, the animal shelter ads with the song In the Arms of the Angels. That is sadness. That is a use of pathos that is appealing to our emotions to persuade the audience to get some response to us, to make their message more effective. That's what you're going to be doing when you're identifying pathos. You won't just say that the author is using pathos. You'll say that they're appealing to pathos, or they are using humor or sadness to appeal to pathos. Logos. In your textbook, it mentions that this is one of the more complicated ones out of the rhetorical triangle, the ones that you may be more familiar with. We are often taught that logos is about statistics and facts, but that's not necessarily correct. That can be a part of logos, but it's not all of it. Logos is an appeal to reason and logic. It is trying to use reason to persuade the audience. And there are different ways it can do this. Again, just like with ethos and pathos, we're going to be very specific in identifying the type of logos that's happening here. Narrative logos. It utilizes storytelling to offer new perspectives and challenges the audience's previous reasoning. I.e., or an example of this is advertisements from transportation departments. For those of you that are not in Texas, you will have your own experiences with this. But here in Texas, we have this program that's called Click It or Ticket. And they often have videos where people who have been in accidents caused by drunk drivers or caused by not wearing their seatbelts will give their testimonials about what happened to them and the aftermath of dealing with that, in a means to tell a story, to persuade the audience to wear their seatbelt or to not drink and drive. That's narrative logos. Cause and effect logos. The rhetor offers the effect of a cause or the cause and likely effects to persuade. Example, a rhetor is talking about excessive pollution from not regulating carbon emissions that result in global temperatures rising. This would be cause and effect logos, trying to persuade the audience that we need to pay attention to carbon emissions because global temperatures are rising. There is an effect that is going to be detrimental to us. Problem and solution logos. The rhetor explains a problem and offers a solution, or solutions to persuade the audience. The stray example of this, the stray cat population is growing. We need to improve and fund the local TNR programs. That's trap, neuter, release programs. With cause and effect logos and problem and solution logos, they can be reversed, as in that they might list the effect first and then give the cause, or they might list the solution first and then give the problem. Either way, it's still going to be that type of logos, but you may see it reversed. If you're getting the appeals confused, remember, I often see students get ethos and pathos switched. Ethos, E stands for ethics, which is connected to character and credibility. Pathos, P stands for pain or passion. It's Greek for suffering. So if you can remember pain, you'll remember that pathos is the emotional appeal. Logos, of course, L stands for logic, and then kairos, it's our odd one out. But if you know any Greek mythology, then you can use chronos, who is the personification of time, to assist with this appeal. It is likely, though, that because kairos is kind of the odd one out, you'll be able to remember it a little easier than switching ethos and pathos. But what is kairos? Again, this is one you may not be super familiar with, so we're going to go a little more in depth in it. We're going to practice with it alongside practicing with other rhetorical appeals as well. So, kairos is Greek for time. For rhetorical analysis purpose, it's how we use time in significant ways in or for rhetorical situations. Whenever you're evaluating kairos, consider the context. Are arguments being made? The locations. Who is making the argument? Where? The text. How does the text present itself as responding kairotically? What is opportune about this time and this space or place? Understanding the rhetorical situation can be crucial in evaluating kairotic appeal. And we talked about the rhetorical situation in last week's video. For kairos, the utmost thing of importance for this rhetorical appeal is that something is special about the moment that the rhetor is making the argument. There is something they are responding to. There is context there that they are responding to, that if they were not responding in the time that they are, their argument would be ineffective. It is because they have selected this time and this place to publish or this space to talk about it that their argument is effective. So let's talk about some examples of it. One of my favorite ways to identify kairos is through the use of memes. I only have one in this PowerPoint, but memes are incredibly kairotic. So let's talk about a recent meme. On the left, we have a picture from McDonald's. It has a picture of Grimace, who is one of their mascots, with a meal from McDonald's as well as the new Grimace shake. And then we have some people in the background as well celebrating. The caption says, "Me and my friends celebrating with my B-Day meal and shake at McD's." So, take in that photo for a moment, think about it, then ask yourself these questions. To identify the rhetorical context first. Who is the rhetor? Who is the intended audience? What is the intended purpose? What is the exigence? This one may be the one you have the most fun with if you're privy to the memes that are going on right now. What are the unintended effects of this text? Then, how does this text present itself as responding kairotically, if it does? What other rhetorical appeals or devices do you notice? So take a moment, get out a piece of paper, write these down so that you have a list, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay, so talking about this picture, the Grimace shake and rhetorical analysis beginning nouns. So on this side in the purple, we have the unintended effects, but first let's focus on the white text. So our original rhetor is McDonald's. They're right here. They're the ones posting this. The intended audience would be possibly Americans that connect with the nostalgia of the mascots and enjoy McDonald's meals. This is going to be a little more specific than just saying people that enjoy McDonald's. We're specifying a group of people, Americans, because we know that this is a very classic American setup of the way that McDonald's is being served. We know that this is the American McDonald's platform. But also we have the nostalgia of the mascots included in here. A message is going to be less effective if the people who are receiving it do not know who this character is. They do not connect to that character. And then, of course, they have to enjoy the meals. They have to want to also purchase this. What's the purpose? To sell the shake. This is a new shake that McDonald's has rolled out, and they want to sell it to people. The exigence. What are the larger conversations that are happening here? Like, what is underlining this? Goodness, did I leave it on? I'm thinking I left it off. Anyways, exigence, again, to sell shakes. That is the problem they're responding to. They're wanting to increase their business. Okay. Unintended effects, we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's bump down to here. How does the text present itself as responding kairotically? Summertime is going to sell more cold shakes. People do not want to purchase milkshakes in the winter. Well, maybe they do, but they're likely going to sell more in the summertime, where people have more time to go purchase them. And then what other rhetorical appeals do you notice? Situated ethos, longtime mascot of the company, Grimace here. It's a trusted fast food company for quick, tasty meals. That's another situated ethos happening here. Invented ethos. Our shake will be delicious too. This is building off of the situated ethos that says, you know, you trust us for our chicken nuggets and you trust us for our burgers. Well, you should trust us for our shake too. You'll know that, you know, our food is good. You enjoy our french fries. So why wouldn't you enjoy our shake? Pathos. You will make great memories with your friends too at McDonald's. This is a series of photos that don't have all of them included, but you see people smiling and laughing with one another and having a general good time with one another as they're eating at McDonald's. So it's a little bit of appeal to pathos, appealing to the kind of fun, the emotion of like having fun, of feeling loved and enjoying something. Okay, so now let's talk about the unintended effects of this text. I cannot detail it too much because of Texas laws that prohibit me talking about a certain clock app, but there is a lot of memes going around right now that have to do with the Grimace shake, and essentially people try the Grimace shake and they end up in an unfortunate circumstance. So Let's talk about that unintended effects and how that introduces a whole new rhetorical context to what's going on here. We have various creators on Twitter, TikTok, etc. Who enjoys that? Who's our audience? Children to adults who enjoy meme humor primarily. Again, we want to specify that they enjoy meme humor. It's not just humor, but it's a specific category of humor. And this is a little bit broad, but this is what I've noticed. And I think that by adding the meme humor here, we're being specific enough. So what is the purpose? To make people laugh, join in on the trend. Does this unintended effect, do these rhetors, do they present themselves as being kairotic? Yes, because the meme is current and trending. If they were to post this meme 6 months from now, it probably wouldn't receive the same reaction and the same kind of attention that it does right now because it's current. We skipped over exigence, but the problem that they're responding to is that McDonald's is trying to sell this shake and they think the shake is a funny color and maybe they're intimidated by the mascot. So they're going to make some dark humor out of it. Another, besides kairos, another thing we can identify is pathos, which is dark or absurd humor. Okay, so that's a look at what it means to break down the rhetorical situations and how we can put them in conversation with the rhetorical square. Again, this is just a beginning analysis. This can be expanded so much further, but I'm hoping that this is helping you to start to identify how you can piece these things together and how you can be specific in doing it just off of a set of a few questions. So let's do another one. It's not a meme this time. Instead, I'd like you to stop the video and go watch This Is America by Childish Gambino. After you watch this music video, then come back to this video, please. So, after watching the video, again, we're going to ask the same questions. Who is the rhetor? Who's the intended audience? What's the intended purpose? What's the exigence? What are the unintended effects? How does it present itself as kairotic, if it does? And what are the rhetorical appeals or devices do you notice? You can be making these notes as you're watching the music video, or you can make them afterwards. And again, let's talk about it. So, of course, we have our rhetor, which is Childish Gambino, Donald Glover. We know that a little more of the rhetorical context is that it was released in 2018 on Saturday Night Live with Glover as host. It's responding to, so our exigence, the problems that it's responding to. These are some of the ones that are in the video. They are certainly not all of them. Gun violence, police brutality, mass shootings, discrimination, and racism. And importantly, how normalized these occurrences are that we're expected to and tend to accept distractions from them. As you know that Childish Gambino has a very kind of upbeat sound to the song with some very upsetting visuals on the screen. So the question for you then, it presents itself as kairotically because we see it responding to these things that were happening in 2018. So it was effective in its kairos. Then you have to ask yourself, is it effective now? Why or why not? Sometimes, so as I mentioned with the meme, memes can become less kairotic over time as they become less, oh goodness, what is the word? I am totally blanking on the words. Memes become less kairotic over time because they become less present. We'll just say present. They stop being reproduced as frequently because a new meme takes its place and then they continue on and on and on. But there's something different that happens with music videos or that happen with large, often traumatic events, unfortunately. The kairos can be lingering. Something that was kairotic at the time it was published can also still be kairotic now because of the context that it's responding to. If the problems that a text is responding to go beyond just a certain time and space, then the kairos will continue to be effective. But what you have to do is specify why. Why, or why not, is the kairos still effective in 2023 if it's responding to gun violence, police brutality, mass shootings, racism in 2018? What is happening there? How is the context still present? And then just something for you to reflect on, to keep you thinking about unintended effects. What does it say about the text? The text's unintended effects that the song plays or doesn't on the radio? What does that have to do with this part of the exegesis? How are they connected? If anything, you will learn with kairos that almost everything is interconnected. Everything builds off one another. Everything relies on one another. And when you start to understand that, you see all of the pieces, you'll be able to weave it together easier. But it does take practice. So don't be afraid to use these questions. If it is useful for you to continue to practice, and I do recommend it, when you encounter a music video or you encounter an advertisement and you're like, well, that's interesting, you can practice analyzing the rhetorical situation. The more you do it, the better you will be at it. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about rhetorical devices. I'm not going to detail these too much. They are thoroughly detailed in your textbook, but I do want to talk about them in conversation with the three main rhetorical appeals, because it is often that rhetorical devices are used in tandem with rhetorical appeals. So ethos, we have situated and invented ethos. Most often the one that you're going to see used with ethos is rhetorical distance and the grammatical person. That's first, second, or third person. So either using I or you or he or she or they. This focuses on the audience's proximity to the rhetor. The important thing about rhetorical distance is that it builds intimacy. Always think about that intimacy and how intimacy can generate trust between the rhetor and the audience. So if the rhetor is speaking in first person, I did this, I felt this, this happened to me, we are going to feel much more connected to the rhetor than we would if they were talking in third person and they said, he did this, she felt this, they experienced this. We'll still feel a little bit connection, but not as much as we would in that first person. So first person is going to be the closest to our rhetor, it's going to be the most intimate, and then third person is going to be the least intimate. Pathos, identification. This focuses on drawing connections between the rhetor and the audience. The audience can visualize themselves in the rhetor's place. This becomes really important whenever we use pathos. We can connect with sympathy, empathy, humor, sadness, anger, frustration. We can connect with all those emotions. We can connect with anxiety, uncertainty. But it's a little more than that. If the rhetor is detailing their experiences and their experiences are not entirely isolated, the audience may have experienced these same things. That's identification. When the audience can see themselves as having experienced or possibly going to experience what the rhetor has, that's identification. Logos, cultural logics. This is going to focus on the incorporation of images, values, and beliefs of the dominant culture to persuade. So for example, if there are themes and ideals included in a text that are specifically pertinent to Texas or to America, those are going to be cultural logics, and they change depending on what the dominant culture is. The images that are strong and persuading in Texas are not going to be the same strong and persuading images that you would see in North Carolina, or that you would see in California, or that you would see in Minnesota. So that's something to keep in mind. What are the images that are happening here? What are the values present? And what does it say about the cultural logics, the reasoning that is happening here? Ideology. This focuses on largely believed assumptions about the way the world works. It's a worldview. And ideology is informed by mythos, which is a grand narrative about the world. You can think about it as stories that people tell each other about how the world works. You're probably a little more familiar with this one, ideology. It's how people think, feel, or believe about the world. It's where they base their values and their beliefs on. And you will see it peeking into people's text, because ideology is something that is very strong in people. It's often very ingrained in them. We'll continue talking about this, but we're just going to continue on logos. Enthymeme. Remember, meme here is just kind of what you said, or just kind of what we talked about. What is the underlying stuff that's happening here in the meme to understand it? Enthymeme, then, focuses on the unspoken arguments that underlie the overarching argument or message. What is not being said? What is present on the page or on the screen in the text, but is not being stated explicitly? So for example, there is I believe it's Tampax. There's a Tampax ad that I have used with students before, and it is a picture of Serena Williams and quote unquote Mother Nature. And it says like Mother Nature has met her match. So an enthymeme in that ad would be that this is talking about a menstrual cycle. And that is saying, you know, like Serena Williams, a expert tennis player, basically can beat Mother Nature with this specific brand of tampons. Enthymemes are sometimes very obvious and sometimes not, but most times they are something that is just happening there that the audience kind of has to supplement the information for. We know that Mother Nature in this kind of ad means the menstrual cycle. Commonplaces. Commonly held beliefs, values, practices about how to do life. They are harder to identify because they are often so ingrained. They are linked to common sense. So when you think about commonplaces, what are some of the beliefs, some of the things that you do every single day that you think everybody should do? For example, do you believe that men should hold the door for women? Is that a commonplace that you think should be in place everywhere, that should be how people should do life, you know, having that kind of like chivalry? Do you think that whenever someone gives you something, you should automatically say thank you? Do you believe and practice using your manners? So you say like, yes, ma'am, no, sir, goodness, like things like that nature. You might not be able to notice them because you're so used to them happening. So they feel more natural and they're a little harder to pinpoint. But again, breaking down the text, going through it very slowly, you'll be able to see these commonplaces start to come out, especially if you start to think about them as like, what is something that I think is normal, but maybe other people don't? Again, these are thoroughly detailed in your textbook. The textbook goes a little more in detail. But what's happening here, this breakdown I have for you, is that often if you see logos in a text, you will see probably one of these that are listed here. If you see pathos, you will likely see in identification. If you see ethos, you will likely see rhetorical distance and a grammatical person. This is just to help you make connections, to kind of visualize that textual stuff, which is ethos, pathos, logos, and then the contextual stuff that's happening here. And speaking of, remember in last week's video, we talked about textual analysis and contextual analysis. You can do either of these for your rhetorical analysis. You could do both. You could do a mixture. But you're going to want to start thinking critically about like what is happening in constructing the text and what is happening outside of the text that is still being talked with inside of the text. Okay. I also introduced the specific project expectations in last week's video, but I'm going to go over them just one more time again. You're going to select a text to analyze from your Unit 3 reading folder. That can be any of the 4 that are in there. You can pick one of the ones that you wrote over for your summary and synthesis assignment if you would like to, or you can pick a new one. Then you're going to assess the effectiveness, or if you'd like to talk about ineffectiveness, partial effectiveness, or somewhat effectiveness, you can, of the rhetor's claims and their argument, and assess the rhetor's various choices and strategies throughout the text. You're going to pick 3 rhetorical devices / appeals minimum. What does that mean? You're going to identify, for example, you're going to identify ethos, invented ethos, you're going to identify problem and solution logos, and you're going to identify, mythos. You identify those 3 things in the text. Then you're going to talk about how those 3 devices and appeals are showing up in the text, and how those specific devices either make the argument and the claims that are happening more effective, or do they hurt the argument? Do they make it ineffective? Do they make it partial effectiveness, somewhat effectiveness? What choices did the rhetor make? What strategies did they take to be able to include these devices so that they could make an effective argument? It's going to be very important for you to consider the intended audience, the purpose, and the medium. Who is this for? A message cannot be effective or ineffective or partially effective or somewhat effective without an audience to receive it. Who is the intended audience? Identify that first. What is the purpose? What does the rhetor want you to think, feel, believe, or do after encountering this text? And the medium. How is the audience receiving this? And then again, you're going to use rhetorical concepts and terms to explore and explain after you identify whatever devices that you want to talk about. And like I said, the choice is yours. Oh goodness, my laptop froze. There we go. The choice is yours. You can do textual analysis. You can focus on what's happening in the text. You can focus on contextual, which is outside of the text and how it is connecting to the text, or you can weave them together. Either way, you're going to be assessing the effectiveness because of an intended audience. This is your structure breakdown. This is what your essay should look like. It's going to be 4 to 5 pages. You have first your introduction, where you provide a brief summary of the text that you've chosen. You have your thesis statement. You're going to establish your analysis and your argument for effectiveness or ineffectiveness or partial effectiveness or somewhat effectiveness. You're going to state that explicitly. We will have a video that talks about how to write claims, how to write a thesis statement, specifically for this essay. So don't worry about that too much right now. Right now, I want you to start identifying rhetorical devices and appeals, because that's going to be the bulk of your paper, and that's the stuff you're going to be doing this week. You have your first rhetorical device or appeal in your body paragraph. What device or appeal are you talking about? How is the rhetor using it? You're going to pull quotes or examples from the text here. You're going to use MLA to cite them. Why is the rhetor using it? What is its purpose? Is it effective? Is it ineffective? Why? Who's the audience? Who is receiving this? Why is it effective? Why is it not? Again, and then you're going to repeat that for the next 2 body paragraphs. You have your second rhetorical device. You have your third rhetorical device. And then you have your conclusion. Your so what? You should have a move towards a new understanding. There should be something learned because of your analysis. Because we benefit from understanding the rhetorical devices or appeals that are happening within this text. It is worthwhile to understand them so that we understand more fully the argument of the rhetor and the rhetor's purpose. Your conclusion should never be a restatement of your thesis and your introduction. It should move towards something greater, something beyond that. Okay. For this week, like I said, you're going to be starting to craft your body paragraphs for your rhetorical analysis. In your textbook, I want you to read and answer questions for chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11. They're already open. For Monday, 7-3, respond to 2 peers on your summary and discussion of choice. That was for last week. And then you're going to post a putting rhetorical analysis into practice discussion forum. That discussion forum looks very much like the practice that we did in this PowerPoint and this video over kairos. Just a little more focused on rhetorical devices and appeals in general, not just kairos. You're going to pick one of the videos and respond to it. For Wednesday, you're going to respond to 2 peers on rhetorical analysis in your practice. And for Friday, you're going to post a draft work on 1 to 2 terms. That is where you're going to start building your body paragraphs. You will select 1 or 2 rhetorical devices or appeals that you see happening in your text that you've selected, and you're going to write paragraphs for them. You are going to start building the paragraphs for your assignment. So whenever you tackle this, think about it as you are drafting your assignment. And please remember to use these questions to help you think about them. Use these videos, they're here to help you. And I'm here to help. Please utilize the Q&A forum, email me, or the anonymous forum for questions, or schedule a meeting with me. Okay. Take care all. As always, send any questions my way, and I will